Okay, for today's build, I'm going to be focusing on the Inarius set, and this entire build is going to be centered around Ledger's Domain. Basically, I wanted the most simple build I could possibly make and still be able to do higher level rifts. And because Ledger's Domain was buffed quite a bit in 2.6.1, now it's made a primary skill, which is Grim Scythe, into a very legitimate damage dealing ability. So, on top of being able to use a primary skill as your primary form of damage, you're also going to be very tanky and you're going to be doing most of your damage in melee range. So, basically, the whole idea behind this is to keep it simple and let you kind of just not have to feel like you have to type the Gettysburg Address every time you're playing, like 20 times a second, just mashing buttons all the time. I cannot stand that type of gameplay. So this is for people who like a more relaxed type of gameplay. Kind of harkens back to the original Diablo 1 as far as the way that game played. It's still fast paced, and what's really great about this build is you can modify it in a lot of different ways. So if you actually want to go in and start changing stuff, apart from the Ledger's Domain, which is kind of like the entire linchpin of the build, but a lot of the other stuff you can change and still have it's Ledger's Disdain. I'm sorry. I was calling it Ledger's Domain. Anyway, but yeah, because it deals an additional 70% damage for each point of essence it restores, it's going to make Grim Scythe very, very strong. And this is a low roll. You can actually get up to 80% damage for each point of essence Grim Scythe restores. So you can do better. And actually, a lot of my gear isn't optimized. My pants aren't even ancient. I've got a primal belt, but I've still got a little bit of filling out to do as far as my gear goes. Anyway, Crispin Sentence and my Frostburn gauntlets are kind of like going to synergize. So Frostburns have a 50% chance to freeze. Obviously, once the enemy is frozen, Crispin's is going to do triple damage. Also, it gives an additional 20% damage to cold skills. So as a result, I've basically centered most of my abilities around cold, which including Grim Scythe. And so yeah, freezing is going to be a big part of it. And besides the fact that you're doing more damage, the triple damage, frozen mobs tend to do less damage to you. I went for Wisdom of Kalan for my amulet, and that increases maximum stacks bone armor by 5. So this is basically bone armor. You have to have it up at all times, so it's really going to help your defense. Plus you got Dainty's Binding, providing damage mitigation. That's going to help. Nemesis Bracers. My reason for using Nemesis Bracers is mainly to take the pressure off you. Here again, the emphasis is to just make it easier and to put less pressure on you as you're playing. So obviously you're going to get more champion spawns when you're doing rifts, and that's going to make rifts easier and quicker. Ledger's Domain, I went over it. Tragul's Corroded Fang, that's an easy one just because any curse that you put on mobs, as long as they're cursed, you're going to do 200% damage to them. And then to kind of synergize that, to keep the simplicity going, I'm using the Aura of Frailty as my curse. So I don't even have to click on the group of mobs. As soon as the mobs get into range of it, essentially melee range of my bone armor and my melee weapon, they're going to be cursed. And then they're going to take 200% additional damage because of Tragul's Fang. So Ring of Royal Grandeur, that's just a bit. Everybody uses that. But overall, here again, it's cold based, freezing based for Crispin Sentence as well as for defense. And then basically that's the gist of it. Lots of this other stuff you can go in and customize as much as you want. Like I'm using Relaina's Shadow Hook and Overwhelming Essence for the additional damage. If you wanted to do a poison-based build of this, you could use Nares and then poison abilities. Depth Diggers, generally primary abilities, don't do enough damage to justify even being used at a high level, but because of Legends Disdain, now the primary skills do enough damage where I felt like it was worth it to use Death Diggers. And then I've got Unity for additional damage mitigation. Basically, here again, the damage mitigation, it's a balance of taking less damage and doing more damage and simplifying the gameplay so that you're not dancing around, you're not a glass cannon. You can take some hits, you can get crowded up, and you can do good damage and survive. Frost Scythe obviously is going to freeze 50% of the time. This is a big one. I had to use Skeleton Mage Singularity because in order for Legends Disdain to proc, to get that additional damage, it has to be generating essence. The quickest and easiest way to get rid of essence, to burn it off, is to use Singularity because it wipes out your entire essence pool every time you cast it. I've tried using other secondary skills to burn off essence, and what you wind up doing, you spend more time casting secondary skills that do less damage. So you might as well just use Singularity if you want to use this build. And Leech, here again, that's completely optional. That's not something you have to invest in if you don't want to. I just picked it so that when I'm doing a higher level rift and I'm surrounded by enemies, I'm still going to have really good life regen, especially like an elite pack where there's 5 of them. Plus my gem is going to be healing me as well. So yeah, basically, apart from keeping bone armor up, you need to be burning off essence at all times. So that's basically going to be like your rotation. And it's not a strict rotation either. You just have to watch your S's. Keep it down. Keep hitting your Skeletal Mage. Command Golem, I'm using the Ice Golem mainly because of its freeze. So I have a guaranteed 3-second freeze every time I use that. So generally it's on a low cooldown anyway. So like generally when I get to an elite pack, I'll pop Command Golem, Ice Golem, he freezes them, and they go down really quick. But it's completely optional. So if you want to try something else besides Golem and Leech, yeah, definitely. There's other abilities that you can work in. I think some people would probably, a lot of people actually would probably use maybe Corpse Explosion, and that might make this build a build that you can take over GR100. Because Corpse Explosion, and when you synergize it right, especially in this build, since you're going to be fighting in melee range all the time anyway, it could be very effective. Yeah, and then for my gem, I've got Simplicity Strength. Besides the increase to the damage that Grim Scythe is going to do, it heals you for 4% of your life of your maximum health per hit. So that is a lot of healing coming in really fast because I've got Frost Scythe with it, which increases your attack rate, and then I've also got I think it's Grim Reaping in my passive skills to increase my rate of attack. So basically, just by mailing, just by clicking, I'm going to get healed a lot and do a lot of damage. Bane of the Trap, that's basically no-brainer for an Inarius build. I mean, you're going to be fighting melee range anyway all the time. Some mobs are going to be affected by the slow, and you're going to do increased damage. Crispin Sentence, I don't know if there's a Necro build that doesn't use Crispin Sentence, really. And, you know, like I said before, my gear isn't completely optimized. There's better rolls that I could get on a lot of this gear. And I've only got 965 Paragons, so there's definitely plenty of room for improvement if you can get better rolls on gear. Standalone here again, that's because I only have usually my Golem out. The Skeletal Mage doesn't hang around for long, so I'm going to be getting a big bonus to armor. So lots of mitigation, lots of tanky abilities here as well. I think for me personally, you know, it just comes back to just automating as much as possible. You know, the using Relentless Shadow Hook, that's easy to do. I mean, that's basically a passive increase to damage. Final Service, here again, that's just to take pressure off you so that You know, every once in a while, if you mess up, if you lose concentration, you get killed, it's not going to affect your game near as much. So let's just go ahead and jump in. I'm going to do a rift. I think I'm probably just going to do a level 75. I know this can do an 80. I did one not too long ago, so it's completely capable of doing higher level rifts, but I just kind of wanted just more as a demonstration of how easy it is to play. You put down leech in this situation, and basically the more enemies around you, the better. It's not a curse I ever really used very much. I guess if maybe you're using a Tragool's build, you might use it. But in this case, for this build, because I'm trying to keep it simple and not feel like a glass cannon where I'm dancing around all the time trying to avoid hits, I can just kind of stand in and take it. I felt like leech was a good um, curse to use here. You'll notice my S's is going up pretty quick. Yeah, it's really, that's something you have to keep your eye on. One of the few abilities you really, or I guess rotation type um, actions that you really have to keep an eye on. I guess for me, from playing this game for such a long time, to have a primary ability, a resource generating ability, do this much damage and be so simple to execute, it's just fun for me to play. When I first started using this build, I actually went to poison first. So I was using nairs and then trying to maximize my poison damage. And I think what I found from poison is it's definitely a more damage capable build, but not as tanky as using frost. I really like using frost burns here because, you know, these guys in particular, they can burn you down pretty quick. But when you're freezing them as often as frost burns allow you to do, the chances of you getting cut down quickly by a pack of mobs are a lot less likely. And this would be a cool build to use if you're grouping too, if there's another Necro around, because you're not using corpses at all. So if you had another Necro and you're in multiplayer, he'd have all the corpses he could ever need. And using that golem freeze here again, you hit it and guaranteed freeze on the mobs, guaranteed triple damage, and generally they go down really quick. And I've had a few times where I've been cornered pretty bad by a group of mobs, and I was able to put down Leech and just tank through it, no problem. I do feel like Rift Guardians are, if this build has a weakness, it would probably be Rift Guardians. And I'm talking about higher level Rifts, not a lower level like 75, but I can imagine, because your single target damage isn't exceptional, it could be, Rift Guardians could be a little bit of a problem, you know. So maybe if you wanted to swap in Land of the Dead and maybe Corpse Explosion or Corpse Lance, that might make Rift Guardians a little bit easier for you. Because really, Leech and Golem, they're nice to have. I mean, I picked it just for the simplicity's sake, but I can definitely see where if you were to swap in those abilities, especially Land of the Dead and whatever corpse ability you want to use, it's always going to be quite a bit more powerful than a Golem's going to be for you. So that's it. Not my fastest time, but again, I mean, my input was so much lower as far as the clicking and not worrying about rotations and waiting for something to pop. It's basically very simplified gameplay. Perfect for me, and hopefully you'll enjoy it too. So, thanks for watching.